You call this a process.
Yes. Oh, yes, it is.
Okay, let's look at the issue. Let's move from unemployment a little bit, because insecurity that has been a major challenge in the country has been tied to unemployment. So is this process also looking at how to end insecurity?
Well, you know, the issue, the problem with Nigerians is that we try to look at issues in isolation. And when you do, it results in a lot of frustration. You cannot take the issue of insecurity out of the context or the environment in which it is occurring. You need to go back to 2010 and realize what happened. The PDP had a power sharing arrangement where it was 8 years for the North, 8 years for the South. We had a president who was 8 years from the South, and then a president came in who was supposed to do 8 years from the North. Unfortunately, he passed away. And by the law, the vice president stepped in. Now, that brought about a lot of acrimony, a lot of challenges. And there was even a time people thought, you know, it was going to result in the split of Nigeria until the National Assembly came up with a doctrine that they called the doctrine of necessity. And so that was the context in which the 2011 elections were conducted and the context in which Boko Haram arose. That natural split between people in the North who felt it was their turn to be president and people in the South who felt, you know what, let's follow the law and do what is right. And that disunity is what Boko Haram has exploited. So the reason why insecurity has been a problem in the North has been because the needed unity that will enable the government to tackle the insecurity has not been there. And you cannot have an internal problem. It's just like a husband and a wife in their house. If there's a massive quarrel, the house girl can become the madam overnight. That's what we're experiencing with this Boko Haram situation. So when people ask me, then how does that mean the president is going to be able to solve the Boko Haram problem going forward? I tell them it's going to be very simple. Boko Haram is going to fizzle away. The minute Mr. President gets reelected and people in the North realize that the insecurity is no longer a political tool, the needed cooperation to tackle Boko Haram is going to surface. So I don't see Boko Haram as a problem. Once we can get over the elections and the needed unity and the environment is created and people realize, you know what, it's going to be 4 more years before we can become president, Boko Haram will be sorted out.
I laugh.
I will take you up on this.
Please do.
After the elections.
After the elections?
Yes.
But I'm not done with you yet.
Yes,
you see, that part, the question will be, has the president shown the required commitment? In terms of required commitment in the sense that creative leadership to enact policies and galvanize the requisite organs. Because
the army is complaining.
No,
morale,
well, again,
equipment, hold on, morale, equipment,
or the lack of it.
Or the lack of it. Cooperation, even amongst the leadership, in the structure of leadership of the country.
You raise very interesting points, and I don't disagree with you in the question you are asking, not necessarily with your position. But the issue is this. When you have an internal problem, a man who has a problem with his wife does not plumel her to death. If you believe in the marriage, then you have to work assiduously because you know you have children, you know you have relatives and in-laws, left, right, and center, and you realize that if you deal with this woman the way she deserves to be dealt with, then you are going to create a lot of crisis. That's the situation that Mr. President is facing, because the problem is first internal. Remember, we are talking in the issue of context. There was a prevailing problem, and then the Boko Haram crisis arose. And the politicization of Boko Haram has been the major challenge. And that requires a certain kind of character. Look, this president has exhibited, the level of understanding and maturity and cool-headedness that is required in a situation where you can describe as a man having a bee in his pants. Because, if he decides to smash the bee, he might end up smashing himself and creating great damage. And his level-headedness, his commitment and dedication to ensure that Boko Haram crisis is contained while still ensuring development in other parts of the country, it takes a certain kind of character.
Dr. Obisola, you add to it, because the question I want to ask you is, now there's a threat of increasing insurgency globally. Now, curbing Boko Haram, is it a product of the party in power? Would it be a product of the party in power?
Well, what I wanted to add to what he's saying is this, that in order to address the Boko Haram problem, it would be a big mistake not to re-elect President Jonathan. Part of the reason is this. Number one, part of the demand of the Boko Haram is that they are Islamic fundamentalists, and they say they want to create an Islamic caliphate in Nigeria. Mm-hmm. It is imperative for Nigerians to say, no, we will not accede to that. And you will find that anytime the president is moving, sometimes you have some crisis that will be, if he's going to declare that he's going to run for election, they'll bomb someplace before that. So a lot of it is targeting him. Now, you don't want to now accede to that by voting him out. No, we have to, as a nation, say we will not accept this kind of blackmail. And that in itself is going to now strengthen his hand after the election, because you are going to now have to deal with him. He's not going anywhere. Because part of the conditions that they're establishing is that he must go. No, we shouldn't accept that.
Or that he even converts to Islam.
What about the questions of integrity, fighting corruption, moral and absolute probity?
Yes.
What about this? These are some of the issues that are disturbing Nigerians. The fact that corruption doesn't seem to be, it's not looking as if it's being handled.
It's thriving.
Again,
yes.
Okay, now.
And he's quoted to have said something about stealing and corruption, to the effect that stealing is not corruption.
Let me take this stance. Again, I go back to the earlier issue that we don't believe in numeracy. But here we can rely on an external organization. There is an organization, Transparency International, that publishes a corruption perception index of about 170-something countries in the world. Well, how have we done over the years, especially since 1999? How have we done since 2010? I hear people say corruption is worse under this government, is this, that, and the other. And I say, actually, according to Transparency International, it's not the case. We're now the 136th most corrupt country in the world, among the 170-something that they are looking at. And that is still obviously unacceptable. But the 136 in 2014 is better than the 144 in 2013, is better than what it was in 2010. So in fact, if we are looking at statistics which we are not generating ourselves, so you cannot say it doesn't mean anything, we're actually doing better. Secondly, you don't deal with corruption the way that General Buhari did when he came, by sending people to jail for 301 years. You don't deal with corruption in that manner. You deal with corruption by attacking it institutionally, at the institutional level. So how has this government been doing that? In a very, very strange way. The party that has addressed corruption frontally in the history of Nigeria, nobody has done it as much as the PDP. Some of the structures that we now have that is dealing with corruption, whether it is EFCC, whether it is ICPC, well, they were established by the PDP. It was only under them that we actually got some politicians that were either prosecuted or some even went to jail for whatever reason. Not only that, we have institutionally cleaned up, some institutions, whether it is the banks, they have been cleaned up. The fertilizer scam that you had with farmers is no longer there. So there are institutional processes that are being set in place. They are not as glamorous as you coming and saying, lock this person up, make this noise, etc. But it's being done. Today, elections in Nigeria they're not in the tradition of the old. We are now having free and fair elections in Nigeria. We weren't having that before. That is part of addressing corruption, is it not? You have to look at it on all these different levels. Now we have somebody that is talking Mr. Integrity. And we are discovering that Mr. Integrity does not have the requirements for even running for the office. There is a problem with the certificate, and even the one that they have brought, it looks like a forged document. So we must be careful in how we access some of these things.
Doctor, since they're not here to respond to these things, I would rather we left them out completely, because they should have a fair chance to actually respond to what you're saying. So we've looked at corruption, we've looked at insecurity, we've looked at...
I wanted to add on the issue about corruption. He mentioned...
We have run out of time,
okay.
So we just need to take your last word now.
All right. Last word on...
Yes, your last word on the presidential elections of 2015.
Well, I think Nigerians have a very good opportunity of moving forward. The idea that somebody can come from the 1980s and bring back some of these outdated and disgraceful policies that were applied then that brought us nowhere and actually collapsed the economy, to come and institute change in the 21st century, it beats my imagination. I think the way forward is we already have a transformation agenda. We need to accelerate the transformation agenda. We want a National Assembly going forward 2015 to 2019 that wants to work 100% with Mr. President, pass the petroleum industry bill to deregulate the petroleum sector. We want a National Assembly that recognizes that going forward, if we're going to be able to tackle this issue about cost of governance, because I heard one or two of the speakers who were here prior to us talked about the cost of governance. The cost of governance is high because we have over 594 parastatals, ministries, departments, and agencies of governments. We need to clean them up. We have the Orosaye report, but the problem with implementing the Orosaye report is that a lot of these agencies and parastatals have legal backing. Unless those laws are annulled by the National Assembly, the president cannot begin to implement. So we want a National Assembly that understands that, so that more revenue can be freed up to allow for the improved infrastructure that Mr. President has already put in place. And these are the desires and expectations we are looking forward to.
Okay. Your parting shot?
Well, there is a lot of drama about this election, but my position is simple. In the end, it's going to be dependent on the ground game. And the ground game is very, very strongly on the side of the government in power. They have been around for 16 years. And PDP, for good or ill, is the only truly national party that we have. So they have people on the ground. Forming a one-year-old alliance that is relying on getting votes from the Southwest is not going to help, because even the Southwest cannot be won by the APC. And so...
Oh, you haven't landed?
No, okay, I have landed.
Thank you very much. We have been chatting with members of Nigeria for Change, Barrister Kingsley Omose, as well as Dr. Femi Aribisala. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.
Sunrise will return in just a moment with the home stretch. Make sure that you're there when we come back.